Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Brittany Martin with the American Marketing Association. Thank you so much for joining us for our Higher Ed virtual conference, The Year Ahead. We have a great presenter for you guys today, Garrett from Lucidpress, who will be presenting on brand templating. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Feel free to utilize those chat boxes to type in your locations and the companies that you're currently working for. And I also just want to let you guys know that if you have a specific question for our presenter today, you can utilize that Q&A tab towards the bottom of your console. So let's go ahead and get started with Garrett.
Thanks, Brittany. Really appreciate it. Happy to be with you all today. Thank you for taking a few minutes and spending some time with me today. I know there are a lot of great speakers with this at this event, so I appreciate you spending some time here. My commitment to you is I'm going to do my best to make sure that I can share something that you can take back and use in your daily jobs. So that's my goal today. So I want to jump in and talk a little bit about this topic of brand templating. Might not be something you're that familiar with, maybe not something you've heard of, but today we're going to talk about what it is and how you can implement it to solve some of the challenges that many of you likely are facing in your jobs today. Before we do that, though, I want to give you a little bit of background about myself because it has shaped how I think about the topic that we are discussing today. So years ago, after graduating school and doing my own startup for a while and learning what not to do when starting a company, after that experience, I moved to Minneapolis. Anyone here from Minneapolis? Do we have anyone from Minneapolis? Hopefully we do. Excellent. Minneapolis is a beautiful city. I would highly recommend, if you haven't been there before, to visit. Just don't go in the winter time. Had a rude awakening my first winter there with how cold it got. So I had a chance to work in Minneapolis at Target, the retail company, at their corporate headquarters there in a variety of marketing, brand management, and strategy roles, and learned a lot about building a consistent brand. A few years later, though, I had the opportunity to move to Salt Lake City. Anyone from Salt Lake City? Excellent. I know I was looking through some of the universities that we have here, and I think that there are a couple from Salt Lake City here. So was able to join a small startup at the time that was just launching a new product called Lucidpress and had the opportunity to come in and run their marketing. And one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about my time at Lucidpress is the opportunity to talk with lots of different marketers and designers and brand managers. And it's been hundreds over the last few years, many in higher ed. And to hear some of the challenges that they're facing and some of the trends that they're seeing in the industries where they operate. So one of those trends is what I'd like to talk to you about today. It's what I call a design democracy. So this trend is something that has emerged across all industries, including higher education. As I talk with marketers and brand managers, those in communication roles in higher education, there's this idea of this design democracy, and there's two parts to it. So let me explain what I mean. The first part of the design democracy is that the world now expects great design. How many of you are familiar with the Webby Awards? Starting in 1997, they're a website that started rating the best designed web pages out there. So you can see in 1997, this Family Planet webpage was the winner of the best designed web page out there. And you compare that to just this last year, 2018, of this National Geographic homepage, where I'd have to mention here, this is also a beautiful looping video of these underwater landscapes and some African savanna and some beautiful looping video. So if I were to ask you which of these is the better design, what would you say? Now, hopefully, most of you would say the second, the National Geographic one. There's nothing wrong with the Family Planet webpage. By 1997 standards, it was excellent. It was an award winner. But design has come so far that if we pulled most people off the street today, I think most people would say that the National Geographic homepage is designed better. It looks better. This also exists in higher education. I pulled this quick example of Harvard University. Their homepage from 1997, they're probably one of the first universities who had a website and a homepage. This is only about 6 years after the first website launched. And so they were probably on the cutting edge. And by 1997 standards, their website was probably pretty good. But you compare that to their homepage recently, and you can see that there's a vast difference. And obviously, design has come so far that that's what people expect. This isn't a trend that just exists across web design, though. There are plenty of other examples of great design across other channels and other mediums. How many of you have heard of this company called the Museum of Ice Cream? If you haven't heard of it, you should check it out. It's a very, very unique startup that is kind of a combination between an ice cream parlor and an art gallery, where they do massive displays in cities like San Francisco and New York of swimming pools full of sprinkles and some crazy things like that. They have a beautiful Instagram account. If you haven't seen it, I would check it out. Excellent examples of great design. And they're just a startup. Another example, how many of you have heard of this website, reallygoodemails.com? It's just a showcase of all of the really well-designed emails that real companies are sending out. And so you can go through and get some examples. So again, I could go on, but you get the point. The world now expects great design. The second component to this idea of design democracy is that everyone across every organization is now a content creator. If you think of the Mad Men days, any Mad Men fans out there? If you think of the Mad Men days of the 1960s, it was typically a strategic, highly trained marketer or advertiser doing mass marketing to a mass audience. And that's how it worked across most organizations. But today, it's everyone across your organization. It might be faculty, staff, students, alumni, who are all creating a variety of content across a variety of channels: print, web, email, direct mail, social media, and the list goes on. Not only that, but they're creating this content for an increasingly fragmented audience that expects the content to be tailored and relevant to them. So this obviously creates some challenges. 72% of organizations are producing significantly more content than they did a year ago. Is your organization? I'd be willing to bet that whether you know it or not, they likely are. And so the challenges that come about because of this increased expectation of great design and more content creators, here's one of them: off-brand rogue content. Who has ever seen off-brand rogue content created at your university or college? I'm sure it doesn't happen at yours. It happens at all of them. That's the truth. And unfortunately, if you look at this flyer that was made for a music festival, what is the perception that you have of the event? Probably not very good. It doesn't seem like a very high quality event. And we're not poking fun at whoever made this flyer. They probably did the best they could with the tools and the resources and the knowledge that they had. But the unfortunate fact is it taints our perception of the event that they were trying to promote. So rogue content, that's one of the challenges that can come about in this new design democracy. The second is a massive backlog for central communication, marketing, creative teams. How many of you have a backlog that looks like this? Probably many of you. And how many of you would say that of all of the tasks that are on your backlog, your list of things to do, how many of them are mundane tasks, mundane edits to things versus strategic priorities? I think that's a challenge that many face today. And so I want to hear about that. So we're going to do our first poll right now. So first question I have for you is, how are you doing keeping up with the increased demands of content creation? Are you feeling these impacts? Are you feeling that there are more and more requests coming in? Feel free to share your thoughts. Looks like we're getting a lot of responses coming in. Okay, good. It's great to see. I found it's interesting to see the difference of responses depending on your role. So if you're a person who is constantly creating the content, you're doing the actual creation, whether you're a graphic designer or a marketer, and you're doing the creation of collateral, often your response is different from the director level who might be a step or two above managing that team. And so it's interesting seeing that breakdown here. So it looks like if we go to this next slide, the breakdown here. So virtually, I want to know who the three of you are who feel like you have all the time in the world, because I would love that type of job. You're going to have to message me after here and let me know. But it looks like the vast majority of you are feeling the pressure but managing to stay afloat. And there's a lot of you who just feel like you're drowning and need some help. So Good. I think that we have something today that we're going to share that will help you with that. So next question we have here is kind of what I talked about earlier. How much of your time is spent on those mundane tasks versus strategic priorities, things that you feel like really move the needle, especially if you work in marketing and branding and communication. It's those big meaty projects that you want to do and that will have an impact. How much of your time is spent there versus the tweaks and edits as you get in a request for a simple poster and you just need to tweak the date on it or whatever it is, right? Good. It looks like we're starting to get a lot of responses coming in. Excellent. Give it another minute or two and we'll take a look here. So it looks like so far, the vast majority of people feel like they're pretty split between the mundane tasks and the strategic priorities. Again, I want to know who those three people are who only focus on strategic priorities. Maybe they're the same people who have all the time in the world, but excellent. Okay, so really similar results to the last question, it looks like. It looks like the vast majority of people, as we look at this, are really split between those mundane tasks and strategic priorities. So you're doing the best you can, you're getting some of those strategic priorities, but you still have a lot of the mundane tasks. There's a large portion of you, a third of you who responded, said mostly mundane tasks. Well, how do you move away from those mundane tasks? We're going to talk a little bit more about that today as we move along. So before we jump into this, I want to tell just a quick story. So I was talking to an executive director of marketing and brand at a large university here in the U.S. A few months ago, and he made a really interesting comment. He said that if you want to know what is upcoming, what the trends are that are going to be hitting higher education, you just need to look at publicly traded companies, because often higher education is just a few years behind, facing some of the same challenges or adopting some of the same best practices as publicly traded companies. So I thought that was a really interesting thing. I think a lot of that has to do with just the size of many higher ed organizations. It takes a while to move and steer a big ship in a different direction. I think a lot of it could just be just the nature of the industry. But as you think about that, let's look at some publicly traded companies and some of the trends impacting them. One of them is an increase in competition. So this is from a study done by a strategy consulting firm, Innosight, where they looked at the S&P 500, so the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the U.S., and they looked at the impact of what's happening in the industries where they operate. They found that 50% of that S&P 500 will disappear by 2027. And it's because the average lifespan has been drastically decreasing. In 1964, it was 33 years, and by 2027, they estimate it's only going to be 12 years. So that the rate of competition has increased, and it's harder for companies to stay relevant. But if you look at some of those companies on that list of S&P 500 who are design-centric organizations, companies like Apple, Coca-Cola, Nike, Target, Walt Disney, you see that they actually outperform the rest of the S&P 500. This is from a study done by the Design Management Institute a few years ago, where they measured just the financial returns of those publicly traded stocks from these design-centric companies compared to the rest. And they found that design-centric companies outperform others by an average of about 211%. It's drastic. Not only that, but these are also some of the companies who have built some of the world's strongest, most valuable brands. Did you know that last year, Apple's brand was estimated to be worth $183 billion, billion with a B. That has nothing to do with their company or their IP or any other assets. That's just the estimated value of the brand that they have built. It's astounding. So it begs this question of, well, what can higher education learn from this? Well, as I've dug into this, I've noticed actually similar trends that are affecting higher education. There is an increase in competition in higher education. So there's been a steady decline in student enrollment numbers in U.S. institutions. So in 2010, there was about 21.1 million fall enrollments at higher ed institutions in the U.S. And that number has dropped to, in 2016, only 19.8. So the numbers are declining. There's fewer students that universities and colleges are competing for. but the space is getting more and more crowded. Today, there are over 4,700 degree-granting higher education institutions alone in just the US. You add into that the impact of online education and how people can go to a college not actually even being in the same city, and the competition is increasing there. So fewer students, more competition. But if you take a look at colleges and universities that are building strong, consistent brands, they're outperforming others. I'm going to share two just very quick case studies here that will highlight this. The first is Babson College. So Babson's outside of Boston. It's a small college, only of about 3,000 people, 3,000 students. But they've done it amazing, differentiating themselves from their competition and really standing out and honing in on what makes them unique and the essence of their brand. And it's paid off. In the last 25 years, Babson has been ranked #1 in entrepreneurship. They've gone all in on entrepreneurship. Though being a small college, that's what they're known for. That's what they're best at. And they've even gone so far as to trademark some phrases like entrepreneurship of all kinds and entrepreneurial thought and action. And these are things that are consistent across a lot of their marketing materials and their campaigns. They know what they're best at, and they've doubled down on that, and it's paid off. Another quick example, Arcadia University. So Arcadia is outside of Philadelphia. They're also a small college. In fact, in the early 2000s, they were named Beaver College. And they had done some research and found that 30% of prospective students didn't apply because they didn't want to go to Beaver College. They didn't like the name. Interesting, right? And so instead of just finding that and saying, well, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. They listened to their audience. They listened to those prospective students. They decided to do a rebrand, which is a big undertaking. But as they rebranded to Arcadia University in 2002, they started seeing the results of more students applying. And by 2006, they had doubled student applications just through that rebranding process. So again, these are two quick examples. But as we think back to these examples of, these universities that are brand focused and those companies that are design centric, what are they doing to win? What are they doing that the rest of us should pay attention to? There's lots of potential answers to that question. But one of them that I'll propose to you today is that these design-centric, brand-focused organizations understand the relationship between brand, design, and marketing, and they optimize for consistent experiences across each of those. Let me help you understand what I mean. So this is one of my favorite quotes or definitions of marketing. Marketing is the truth of you or the truth of your organization translated into the language of your customers. So let's break that down a little bit more. The truth of you, isn't that just a proxy for your brand? Anyone who's ever done brand work or a brand identity workshop knows that as you do that, you're really just trying to get at who are we? What's the truth of who we are as an organization? And that's the essence of your brand. Another way to think about that, Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, has said, your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. Well, think about that. What would other people say about you or your organization when you are not in the room? Would it be positive? Would it be negative? What are the first words that would come to mind? It's important to think about that. I invite you to jot some of those ideas down as we go through this. So going back to that original quote about marketing, marketing is the truth of you or brand translated into the language of your customers, especially in today's design democracy. Design is the language that you are communicating to your customers through, or there's at least a heavy design component to that language. Mark King, a design consultant, has said this, and I love this quote. He said, design is the body language of your marketing. Don't slouch. If you think about the content that's created across your organization, how slouchy is your marketing? I think many of us would probably cringe a little bit thinking about that because we know that, there's opportunity for improvement, and that's okay. I think the first step is identifying that and then finding the way to improve upon it. So again, going back to this idea, these design-centric and brand-focused companies, they don't only understand the relationship between brand, design, and marketing, but they really optimize for consistency across each of these. So what that looks like is not just that they have brand guidelines in some static PDF somewhere and no one ever reads it, they don't know where it is. but they do a good enough job helping everyone across their organization internalize the essence of the brand, so that it doesn't matter which department you work in, that they can say it in their own words. They understand what the essence of the brand is. And they have the tools and the resources and the knowledge to be able to communicate the essence of that brand consistently. The result of doing that, when you can empower an entire organization, is that people know who you are. And they want to come to your university. And they want to fund your university. They want to contribute if they're alumni. They know who you are, and there's great results that come from that. But you guys probably all already know that. Consistency is not a new idea, especially if you work in marketing, branding, communications. You know that it's important to be consistent. What's unique about today's design democracy, though, is the way that winning organizations are going about achieving consistency. In the past, achieving consistency was all about limiting who tells the brand story and how they tell it. So, for example, saying, you're not allowed to create any of these things that are branded. You send the request to us and we'll create it because we're the experts. Remember back to those Mad Men days? Isn't that kind of similar, reminiscent of that? Today, however, these winning organizations are empowering all stakeholders to tell the brand story, but they're doing it in a way that they can tell the story consistently. I'll explain more about how that's possible. So next questions. We're not going to do a poll for this one, but I invite you to take out a pen and paper, write some thoughts down. If you'd like, feel free to share your responses to these questions in the chat. I'd love to hear what you have to say. But as you think about your answers to these questions, the first, what is the essence of your brand? On that question, think back to the quote from Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, where your brand is what people would say about you when you're not in the room. So what would people say about you when you're not in the room? And that's getting at the essence of your brand. So I invite you to think about that. Jot some ideas down. The next is what's working well in communicating that consistently and what's not working well. Maybe there is a certain department or group on campus that is just really bad. They create a lot of off-brand rogue content. That's okay. The first step, again, is identifying who they are, and so we can figure out a plan of how to work better with them. What else is not working in communicating consistently? What is working? What have you done great so far? It's important to reflect on that. And again, I invite you to write some thoughts down. So as we move along here, through that process, especially thinking about the essence of your brand, there's probably some of you who have some great new ideas for some big awareness campaigns, something you can do to just kind of get the word out there and help people really know who you are. Help them know who your university is. Big strategic awareness campaigns like that are excellent, and they can go a long way, but they're not the end-all be-all. And they're not, if that's all we're doing, we're missing out on something really important. Michael Eisner, the former CEO of Disney, said, a brand is a living entity, and it is enriched or undermined cumulatively over time, the product of 1,000 small gestures. So if you think about that, what are those small gestures? What are those things that are either enriching or undermining your university's brand over time? Well, there are things like the brochures that people are creating for student recruitment. Maybe the social media posts that people are sharing. Maybe it's the flyers or the posters that on-campus groups are creating to help promote their events. Maybe it's the alumni relations materials that are being sent out, or a magazine that's created for alumni. All of these things, though small individually, are the things that either enrich or undermine your brand over time. And it's important that you don't just focus on the big strategic campaigns, but you find a way to optimize for consistent experiences across all of these touch points. And that's how winning organizations are going about succeeding. The unfortunate fact, though, is that there are going to be winners and losers in this new world of a design democracy. And the losers are going to allow those across the organization to continue creating off-brand experiences, which will stunt the growth of their organization and their brand. The winners, on the other hand, are going to find the ways to scale great design across all channels and in turn create a really strong brand. So imagine with me for a moment. So those of you, I think many of you probably work in marketing, branding, communications. Imagine with me for a moment that the brand of your college or your university, the brand that you work every day to try and build, imagine that that brand was understood, consistent, and indispensable. Understood meaning that you don't just have brand guidelines, but they're well defined. They're internalized by everyone across the organization and they're followed. Consistent across every channel, experience, and communication, whether you and your team are creating the content or someone else on campus is. And indispensable meaning that everyone knows that the brand is vital to the growth, revenue, and success of your organization. Sounds pretty good, right? Isn't that a world that most of us would like to live in? Well, let's build on top of that. Imagine if in that same world, your team, the central communications, marketing, branding team was effective, fulfilled, and respected. Effective meaning that those building the brand could spend more time on actually building the brand and less time policing it. Fulfilled meaning those designers or those individuals who are actually creating the content that's being sent out can spend more time on strategic priorities and less on those mundane edits. And respected meaning all campus clients, everyone you work with across campus could see your team as strategic partners who could really help them do their work better, and not just someone who could slap design on this thing and make it look better at the end of their project. Doesn't that sound like a world that all of us would want to live in, where you have this strong brand and this effective, fulfilled, respected team? I think it is. And as I've talked with hundreds of marketers in higher education, that's really what they're striving for. That's what they want. The unfortunate fact, though, is most of us operate in one of two different worlds. The first I'll call the Wild West. And some colleges and universities, some organizations out there operate in this Wild West format where they have weak brand guidelines. So as a result, rogue off-brand content is created and the brand suffers because of that. On the flip side, there's some organizations who operate in what I call the brand prison. It's where they've tried to optimize for consistency. They know that it's important, but the way they've gone about it is how companies and organizations used to do it in the past. It's by limiting who can do the content creation. They have a central team that creates all the content. They say, send us your requests and we will create the content for you. It sounds great on the surface, but the problem with it is that those on the team are overloaded and stressed out. They're spending all of these time on these mundane edits. And there's a really long turnaround time. So people don't actually like sending in a request. They don't have 2 weeks or a month to send something in. They need something right now. Right? So these are the worlds that many people are operating in, but there's a better way. That's what I'm here to tell you about. And it's what we call brand templating here at Lucidpress. What brand templating is all about, it's about empowering all brand stakeholders, everyone across the organization, with the tools and knowledge and resources that they need to create on-brand content quickly and easily on their own, separate from your team. And I know hearing that probably makes some of you cringe a little bit and it makes you a little bit nervous, but I'm going to explain how it's possible to do that, allow them to create things on their own without sacrificing brand consistency. Brand templating is also the way that you can double your communication team's output in half the time. Again, the title of this discussion today. And it is the solution for thriving in today's new design democracy, the new world that we live in. So let me break it down a little bit further and tell you what brand templating is really all about. There's 3 main steps to brand templating. The first is creating easy to find libraries of approved templates and brand assets. Many of you probably have some templates somewhere internally, probably some Word or PowerPoint templates for basic things like letterheads or presentations, things like that, right? Most organizations have something like that. But are they up to date? Are they useful? Are people downloading those templates onto their desktops and then continuing to reuse them over and over and over? And so that when you go to update or refresh the brand, maybe update a logo, they're using the old outdated version. I've seen this happen so many times across many organizations. Can people find the templates, or are they stored internally on some wiki and they have no idea where they actually are? It's probably worth doing some research to understand what types of templates you need to create. What types of materials are people requesting most often? those are the things that you need to be creating templates for. The next component of this is making sure that you don't just share the templates, but you also share the approved brand assets. These are things like logos, brand colors, brand fonts, icons, images, patterns, maybe product descriptions or copy boilerplates, things that are pre-written to help describe your organization. You need to give and empower end users with not just the templates, but also these assets to be able to allow them to create something that's on brand. Well, why do we want to do this? Well, do you really want someone on campus trying to figure out what the difference between RGB and CMYK is? Would you like them to swap out your font in the template that you created with Comic Sans? Of course not. Like, these are not things that we want to have happen. So as a result, we need to empower individuals across the organization with not only the templates, but also those approved brand assets. Okay, next step in brand templating is to be able to lock down important elements of your brand on those templates to ensure consistency. So if you have a flyer, for example, you've created a flyer template. If they don't need to customize the logo, which rarely do they need to be able to customize the logo, you don't want them to be able to turn it pink or stretch it or do whatever. So lock it down. You lock it down so they can't change it. If you want them to be able to update copy, but you want to enforce your brand fonts and colors, do so. Lock it down. This is the only way to ensure that these non-designers across campus can create something that's on brand and that scales. And by doing this, we're not limiting who is allowed to create content, but we're giving them the guardrails that they need to be able to succeed and be able to create content that is on brand consistently. It's important to note that not all software programs out there that you can create templates in allow you to lock down at the same level. And so as you think about and consider building out templates for your college or university, think about that first before you build out your templates. Where are you actually going to build those templates? And how can you build it in a place that will allow you to lock it granularly enough to control your brand? Okay, next step. Last step here is to then, once you have those templates and approved assets and they've been locked down, then you share them out and you empower non-designers to customize those templates with the approved assets and then share that finalized content. This is the step that probably involves the most internal process changes and mindset shifts in order to be successful. So there are many employees or staff members who are going to be very excited about their opportunity to play designer, if you will, and create some content on their own. There are going to be others, though, who are a little bit hesitant. You're going to have to coach them and convince them. They're going to need a little bit of coaching and encouragement to jump in and try it, to grab a template and the assets and customize it on their own. They're going to, over time, I've seen that in similar organizations, that these people who are a little bit hesitant at first quickly see how powerful it is and how easy it can be to create their own things when you've provided them with the template and the assets. They can create something quickly that looks great, and then they feel more encouraged and empowered to go forward. Similarly, we need to coach those designers or marketers, the people who are currently creating the templates and the content for your organization, that when they receive an inbound request or ticket from someone requesting customized collateral, that they push those requests back to the templates and the assets that you've already created. This is the only way to get out of that, cycle of consistent requests and mundane edits. You push them back to those resources so people can create things on their own. And that's the only way that you're able to preserve that precious time for the bigger strategic initiatives without having people feel bogged down with those mundane and menial tasks and edits. So that's a quick high-level overview of brand templating. What do you think? Do you feel like brand templating could help you at your organization? Does it feel like you are facing some of the challenges that we talked about today? I hope so. I hope that you found something that you can really take with you. And I don't want you to just take my word for it. Again, I've spoken with hundreds of marketers, brand, communication folks in higher education, just like you. And I've heard this problem that they talk about consistently. And while I can't have them here with me today, we talked with some of them recently, and I want to share a video clip talking to some of these university brand managers. The first clip, we asked them, what problems did you face before brand templating? As you watch this clip, I want you to think about, do you have similar problems? Are you facing similar things? Do the things that they say resonate with you? As we go through this, we'll talk about this a little bit at the end. So here we go.
We have about 8,000 plus students.
There are about 25,000 students.
We have 20,000 students, and we have 3 campuses. In design, we have 2 designers, and they service all campuses, all services for staff and students.
We have a very small team. We have 1 designer, and we're trying to do all the content for the whole university.
We're just being bogged down.
And a lot of the projects are based on small things that people need: brochures, flyers, posters.
Lots of flyers, and each one at the moment we're having to create individually, which is putting a lot of pressure on the team to create those.
We are victims of our own successes. People know that we do better work than most of them can do on their own, so they come to us, and we cannot possibly handle all of the requests that come in, so we turn people away, and that makes them go away sad. Or we say yes, and it takes too long, and that makes them sad.
Our biggest problem was brand managing and the distortion of our logos.
What you find is that someone will take the guidelines, and our guidelines are 150 pages, it's big, and they'll take it, skim it, think they get the gist of it, and then create something, and actually it's completely off. All the alignments are wrong, they've maybe used the wrong colours, there's different coloured words in sentences, so it was like a blue sentence with yellow writing halfway through it. I was like, what have you done?
So it's trying to get the brand consistency across the different locations. Even just on the one campus is hard enough.
Our biggest problem was probably time.
The turnaround time for any graphics projects that any department college will need is about 2 weeks.
It can be up to a month because we are quite a small team.
There simply are not enough of us to go around for all of the requests that come in.
Okay, so what did you think? Do any of those challenges, those problems that they mentioned resonate with you? Are they things that you notice in your daily jobs? I think likely many of those problems are pretty universal, that many, if not most, schools have very similar challenges. You're not alone, and that's okay. And the great news is there's a solution that can help alleviate many of the headaches that you have related to some of these challenges that were just discussed. And really that solution is brand templating. That's what can help you to do that. The next question I want to share with you, we asked these same university brand managers, how has brand templating helped streamline your marketing process? So all of those who had implemented a similar brand templating process, what were the results of that? What have you seen so far? And as we watch this again, I want you to think about if any of these, if the solution would be right for you, if you would also like to experience some of the wins that they talk about in this next video. So here we go.
We really need a way to offload a lot of those things that we think could fall into templates.
We were discussing having a template platform, and I did not know where to start looking, to tell the truth.
There was a need for templates. They wanted to have people be able to create documents on their own with a relatively low budget and still be on brand.
I wanted to be able to ensure that everyone across the university could access this and create the right content that was within the new brand. We could create a load of templates, make it very easy for people to create their own content, create their own work, get it printed nice and easily, and it didn't have to impact our department too much as well. We're just there to support them.
I think one of the features that I love is the approval timeline. This means that they will go in and do their own flyer in 5 minutes and probably get approval the same day.
Being able to actually allow other people at different departments to be able to create their own content, so it's saving them time as well, and it's reducing the amount of time that we spend creating things. And it also means then that all of our content is on brand, which is my key priority at the moment.
It's nice to be able to empower people to stay on brand and to still be creative and feel like they're able to tackle
these projects.
It's allowing people to self-serve. So each department can create the content that they want. We're still maintaining brand consistency, and it's keeping the amount of resource down that's required just to keep repeating things. You just build the template, you put it in, and everyone's got access to it. It just makes everything so much simpler.
I think every university should have this because there will always be people that don't plan ahead and that don't request their graphics with 2 weeks in advance. And I think having templates available for them is going to be of great benefits to control the brand. It makes things easy for the end user, for you, and for the overall control of the brand as a whole.
What do you think? Did it resonate? I hope it did. I hope I shared something today that you can take back and apply in your own roles to make your lives a little bit easier. If you're interested in learning more about brand templating and how a brand templating platform could help streamline this process for your university, please visit our website, lucidpress.com/hire-ed, or reach out to me directly. You can see my personal email address there, my work email address there, not my personal email address. And I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you thought of the presentation today. If it resonated, if it didn't, if there were things that you loved, if you hated, I would love to hear it. So please shoot me a note and let me know if you have any thoughts. And with that, we're going to jump into just a few minutes of Q&A. So Brittany, I think I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, great. Thanks, Garrett, so much for that presentation. I want to let the audience know, too, that Lucidpress does have a booth available. So please go ahead and visit them in our exhibit hall. So our first question comes from Jeremiah. Do you have any advice on how to implement a brand new guide while avoiding brand police mentality?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's a challenge that, many marketers face. I have found that it can be successful if you implement it along with a plan for those templates and assets that you're going to be sharing out as well. If you can implement a brand guide and do regular trainings on it, and you are helping people understand that, hey, we want you to understand the essence of the brand. That's why we're sharing this guide out. That's why we're doing this training. And not only that, but we're going to go a step further and provide you with the templates and the assets that you need. The dialogue is a little bit different. It's less about we're sharing this with you because you've been doing wrong and we want you to stop doing wrong. It's more about, here, we want you to understand this so that you can create content on your own that's on brand. It flips the dialogue a little bit when you can share out those templates and assets along with the brand guide. Hopefully that helped answer your question.
Okay, and our next question comes from Viviana. Can you please tell us where taglines fall into this?
Yeah, good question. So, taglines can be great. They can play an excellent role. They usually play a role often at that higher brand awareness level. So when I talked about the bigger strategic campaigns, that's a place where you would often see a tagline. You think about commercials that you've seen or a billboard that you've seen, and often there are taglines there. You can find a way to implement those across other materials, but I think it has to make sense. It probably might not make sense to implement a tagline on every single social post that you do. It might be a little bit overwhelming, right? So picking and choosing what types of content and materials, like a tagline, which plays into your brand, are best for different channels is kind of key, but definitely powerful. Most of the world's biggest brands have taglines. They might have more than one tagline that they use in certain places or with certain audiences and groups. So it can be a valuable tool.
Okay, and we have time for just one more question, and that comes from Shia. She wants to know, what program do you recommend for creating templates and locking down content?
Good question. So I'm a little biased on this one because I work for Lucidpress, and Lucidpress is a brand templating platform. So I would say Lucidpress, where you can set up your templates, you can lock them down. But even if you decide not to use Lucidpress, there are other tools out there that allow you to do some level of locking. And so I think the most important thing is to make sure that you do your research before you build out a huge library of templates so that you can find the right program that meets your needs, that allows you to lock things down to a granular enough level to be able to control your brand.
All right. Thank you so much, Garrett, for presenting with us today. Everyone, let's give Garrett a virtual round of applause by saying thank you in the chat box. And again, please make sure that you visit Lucidpress in our exhibiting hall. But otherwise, we hope to see you at the next presentation, and this webinar will be available on demand once we conclude. Everyone have a great day.